No nation has risen to prosperity without industrialization, a process that demands vast amounts of energy. To stifle a country's development, one need only choke its energy sector. In South Africa, a troubling narrative unfolds, where leaders, swayed by Western interests, are steered away from coal, a cornerstone of the nation's energy supply. They are told coal is a health and environmental menace, a hazard to climate and communities.
80% of our electricity production is coal, and then there's an emissions problems, NOxes, and all of that can result into harmful health consequences for those people. So we have an obligation.
Look at the massive increase in exports to Europe. It's already happened in the last several months. So as a result of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, there's been an increased demand for coal from South Africa by Europe.
Between January, black people don't have ownership. We have ownership of nothing. Even the richest of black people are employed, Baba. They are CEOs, they are tokens, they own nothing. They are nothing. Even the richest of our black people are employed. They are CEOs, they are tokens of big companies. They don't own. Ownership is in the hands of white people, of foreigners, of Europeans, of colonizers. We don't own nothing. Nothing. That's why we can't develop nothing.
No nation has risen to prosperity without industrialization, a process that demands vast amounts of energy. To stifle a country's development, one need only choke its energy sector. In South Africa, a troubling narrative unfolds, where leaders, swayed by Western interests, are steered away from coal, a cornerstone of the nation's energy supply. They are told coal is a health and environmental menace, a hazard to climate and communities. Yet, the hypocrisy is stark. While South Africa's coal is vilified at home, it is eagerly snapped up by European nations. Every day, a relentless stream of trucks laden with coal rumbles toward Richards Bay port, destined for export. Are these European buyers, who champion green rhetoric, merely stockpiling South Africa's coal as decoration for their cities? Or is it fueling their own industries, powering their economies, while South Africa's growth is quietly throttled? The story begins with South Africa's rich coal reserves, a resource that has long underpinned its energy grid and industrial ambitions. Coal-fired power plants, though imperfect, have provided affordable and reliable electricity, essential for factories, mines, and households. Industrialization, the engine of economic progress, thrives on such energy. But in recent years, a shift has emerged. South African leaders, under pressure from Western advisors and global institutions, are urged to abandon coal. The narrative is seductive. Coal is dirty, a climate villain, and its phase-out is a moral imperative. Promises of renewable energy and foreign aid sweeten the deal, but the transition is fraught with delays, inefficiencies, and soaring costs. Meanwhile, the nation's energy supply falters, with rolling blackouts crippling businesses and stifling growth. Behind this push lies a web of influence. Critics argue that South Africa's leaders are puppets, manipulated by Western multinational corporations and their governments, collectively dubbed White Monopoly Capital, WMC, by detractors. These entities, wielding financial and diplomatic clout, shape policies to serve their interests. By demonizing coal, they weaken South Africa's industrial base, ensuring it remains a supplier of raw materials rather than a competitor on the global stage. The energy sector, starved of investment and innovation, stagnates. Development slows, unemployment festers, and the dream of a thriving, self-sufficient nation slips further away. Yet the irony is glaring. While South Africa is lectured to ditch coal, European nations quietly import it in vast quantities. Richards Bay, a bustling export hub, bears witness to this duplicity. Day after day, trucks laden with South African coal snake through the port, bound for ships that will carry it across the seas. Europe, with its lofty climate goals, burns this coal to power its industries, heat its homes, and drive its economies. Germany, Poland, and others, despite their renewable energy posturing, rely on coal to bridge energy gaps. South Africa's coal, it seems, is only a hazard when it fuels South Africa's progress, not when it lights up European cities. This double standard exposes a deeper truth. The push to decarbonize South Africa's energy sector is less about saving the planet and more about maintaining global hierarchies. By keeping South Africa energy poor, Western powers ensure it remains dependent, its potential capped. Coal, a resource that could drive industrialization and uplift millions, is instead siphoned off to enrich others. The nation's leaders, whether complicit or coerced, comply, leaving their people to bear the cost of stunted growth and broken promises. The story is one of exploitation dressed as environmentalism, a tale as old as colonialism but repackaged for a modern age. South Africa stands at a crossroads. Will it reclaim its energy sovereignty, harnessing its resources to fuel its own ascent? Or will it continue to export its wealth, watching as others thrive on the very coal it is told to forsake? The trucks keep rolling to Richards Bay, and the answer remains unwritten.
To 80% of our electricity production is coal, and then there's an emissions problems, NOxes, and all of that can result into harmful health consequences for those people. So we have an obligation to our people before we can make international pronouncements. So we said that we're setting ourselves these voluntary targets, because remember the pace and scale of this transition is going to be determined by us. It's not going to be dictated to us. And then we said the following. We said that we are committing to the reduction of anything between 350 million tons of CO2 equivalent to 420 million tons of CO2 equivalent between now and 2030. But we also know something, that there are what we call the hard-to-abate sectors. So on the electricity front, you can see that we're building, if you like, new generation capacity that is coming from renewables. And to ensure that this is a possibility going to the future, we are also modernizing and expanding our transmission. We need 14,000 kilometers of new lines. We must modernize it. We need about 440 billion rands for us to do that program. And we have announced how we're going to go into the market to get that contribution from the market. And then there are the hard-to-abate sectors. So there is electricity that is a big part of these emissions. And then we know that there's also transport.
South Africa is the world's 8th largest producer of coal and the 5th largest exporter. Since joining BRICS in 2010, most of South Africa's coal exports have been destined for the global south, heading to countries in Latin America and Asia. But European countries are now scrambling for energy security. While most Western nations made great strides in moving away from fossil fuels, the sanctions on Russia are forcing them to go back to coal.
If you look at the massive increase in exports to Europe, it's already happened in the last several months. So as a result of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, there's been an increased demand for coal from South Africa by Europe.
Between January and May of this year, South African coal exports to Europe jumped roughly 40%. Europe demands high-quality coal for its power stations, while South Africa's coal power plants are designed to use low-quality coal. The unit price of coal per ton has increased 5 times in the last several months, but it's a double-edged sword for South Africa.
The coal price is going to go up, and that's going to also push up electricity prices within South Africa. So as the international demand for South African coal goes up, which is temporary, that is going to push up the prices.
The world is attempting to move away from coal, but the Eastern European conflict has dealt climate efforts a bitter blow as countries take up fossil fuels again to ensure energy security.
We have a very, 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 very long history of coal exports to Europe. Before '94, our biggest market.
South Africa is in a tough position. The country is currently trying to secure financing for its energy transition away from fossil fuels. but it also has an opportunity to ramp up coal supply in order to meet this high demand.
Coal is life and coal is death. It is a double-edged sword. For many decades and centuries, it has put bread on the table. It has fueled the South African economy. It has brought foreign exchange through exports. If we decide to stick with coal, we are very quickly going to become an economic pariah. We are not going to be able to export, and we're not going to be able to access finance.
The next steps will be crucial. Sumitra Nadu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
For centuries, Africa's story was written by others, enslavers, colonizers, outsiders who shaped a narrative to control minds and futures. Mainstream media has long painted Africa as broken, helpless, but that's not our truth. We are creators, dreamers, builders. Our ancestors forged empires. Today we're shaping the future, our way. It's time to reclaim our narrative, tell our stories, celebrate our victories. Africans must control the pen that writes our future. Rise up, speak out, the world is listening. Africa's story is ours to tell. Let's write it together. That's a wrap, folks. But before you go, keep this in mind. Their smoke and mirrors are just theatrics, pulling your focus from what truly matters. The real fight? It's always been about the land and the economy. Stay sharp, stay woke, and we'll catch you next time.
The most important person in the world is the storyteller. The storyteller sets the vision, values, and agenda of an entire generation to come. Steve Jobs.